All right, we can officially get started. This is the How the World Sees You workshop. I'm Arby Kelly, and you are here because you are hungry for more excellence, triumph, and freedom in your personal and professional life. And you want to get started first with figuring out how the world sees you. So let's get started right away. One of the biggest things that I teach in my practice is charm. And charm stands for career, home, and relationship mastery. And that's one of the coolest things about body language is that it's not just for sales or just for dating or just for getting rid of predators. Body language and nonverbal communication is crucial for all these different areas. So charm kind of breaks down exactly where you can use these nonverbal skills. And as you increase your nonverbal skills, you end up leveling up in every aspect of your life. And in this workshop today, we're starting with the impression that you give as soon as someone meets you. So in this workshop, you'll find out how people take your measure, why that matters, and how you've been scoring so far. So you're going to learn your first impression strengths and weaknesses. There might be a couple harsh truths in here, but you'll also discover the exact 4 people skills that you need to have in order to achieve that career, home, and relationship mastery. And so let's get started with how the world sees you and what you can do about it. All right, so Kevin, you are not seeing the link. Let me share that one more time so you can see it. Thank you for letting me know. All right, I just shared it again. So you can click on that, and for those of you who are watching the replay, the workbook will be included in the email. Awesome, Kevin. I'm glad you've got it. So we are now down on page 3. Let's start with the science of your first impression. Now, there's so much misinformation about first impressions, how it starts, what you need to do to make a good one, why it matters, how long it takes. And that's because there are a lot of different little scientific experiments that have been run, and each has come up with different numbers. So one experiment studied college students who were applying for a mock job interview that was filmed. And in the first video, what they ended up doing is they took the recording of the job interview, and then they gave it to a group of trained evaluators. And these evaluators were going to rate the students for competence, likability, and overall hireability. And these job interviews ended up being just about 20 minutes long. And so each student was scored according to those 3 areas: competence, hireability, and likability. And then what the researchers did that was kind of interesting is they went back to those videos and they cut it down so they were just about 20 seconds long. So all the poor college students had time to do was open up the door, walk in, shake hands, and sit down. And they cut off the video before the students had a chance to say a single word. And then they went back to the evaluators and they asked them to look at these 20-second videos and see what changed, if that changed their overall rating. And what they found was the overall score students got from the 20-minute video exactly matched the score they got from the 20-second video. And that's a pretty big deal. My dad's an introvert, and so he used to think that his first impression started as soon as he started talking. So in a meeting at work, he'd be biding his time, listening to what everyone else was thinking, and agonizing over what he should say. And then he'd come out and he'd say it and he'd be like, yeah, good job, I made a first impression. But that's not how it works. Your first impression starts way before you open your mouth. It starts as soon as someone sees you or even just hears you. And one different study compared the at the end of the semester, students can fill out a survey and score their professors. Well, researchers decided to give professors a bit of a hard time, and they took videos of a professor teaching that was a fraction of a second long, less than 1 second, fraction of a second long. And they had students watch this fraction of a second and then fill out the end of year, end of term survey. And then they compared the fraction of a second surveys to surveys from students who had actually sat through that professor's entire course. And again, there was almost no difference between the two. So this makes it pretty clear that your first impression happens really, really quickly. And you can't do a lot to change it over time. So that means you need to make sure you are making the best possible first impression right off the bat. And how do you do that? Let's look at the 4 factors you use to make a first impression. Now, most people, like my dad did, they think your first impression is all about the words you say. And that is one part of your first impression. But as you heard in the 2 different studies I told you about, it's really not that important of a part. So words are actually right here at the bottom. That is the last thing that people use to judge you. The most important thing they use to judge you is your body language. The next thing they use is your voice tone. Voice tone is just the way you sound. So if I was to open up this video and be like, "Hi, I'm Arby Kelly. I'm so excited to work with you," you would have a very different idea of me than if I were to say, "Hi, I'm Arby Kelly. I'm excited to work with you." And most of the difference came through in my voice tone. So body language, voice tone, your outer appearance, and finally, your words. And these are the 4 areas that if you want to change the way people see you, this is what you need to target. And when people make a first impression of you, they don't just decide how you look. They don't just notice your body language. They decide your personality. They decide your social standing. If you're on the top of the hierarchy or if you're lurking down near the bottom. They decide if you're important or not, if you're likable or not, if you're safe and trustworthy or not. So there are a lot of different factors that people, they conclude after just a really tiny interaction with you. They sum up who you are as a person. And once they've made that summary, you are going to be very, very hard pressed to change their conclusion. So Mark Bowden, who is a Canadian body language expert and one of my frequent guests on my podcast and TV show, he talks about the 4 different categories that people sort you into as soon as you meet them. 2 of these categories are good. One of them is good for business. The other 2 are not what you want to fall into. And in order to make it really easy to remember, I've put them on fingers. So you just need to look at your hand to judge how you're judging people and how you might be being judged. So the number 1 category, number 1 finger, right? The very best category that you want to fall into as often as possible is the friend category. This is the one that I've been trying to fall into for you during this presentation. And if you think of people in the past that you like, you respect, you want to work with right away, this is the category they're being sorted into. So number 1, friend category. Number 2, this is the category that you sort people into when you either dislike them right away or are afraid of them right away. So if you've ever wanted to flip someone off, this is the category you've sorted them into. Hence, it's on the middle finger. So in a predator category, if someone comes across as being a threat to you, physically, emotionally, socially, your brain will send you signals telling you to stay away from them. And if you notice that you immediately dislike or fear someone, this is the category you've put them into. Then there's the potential romantic partner category, so the ring finger. And if we zoom in here, you can see I even put a tiny little ring right there. So that is that category. And as soon as you meet someone, they will sum you up to see if you fit into this category or not. So if someone likes you but isn't that into you, they'll put you into the friend category. But if they like you and they're into you, then you fall in the romantic partner category. And finally, there's the indifferent category. So you don't need a pinky. You'll survive just fine without it. It serves no purpose in life. And that is the indifferent category. So if you've ever forgotten you met someone, forgotten their name, forgotten they exist, or just looked right through them, this is the category you've sorted them into. And so if you've ever met someone who forgot your name, forgot your business, forgot how you help them, this is a category you've been sorted into. And if you get sorted into the indifferent category, it means people basically see you as moving furniture. They don't think you're good for them. They don't think you're bad for them. They just don't care at all. So the friend and the romantic partner category, if you fall into this category, it's because people think you're good for them. You bring good things. And these two categories, predator means bad things for you, and indifferent means it doesn't matter at all. So your brain takes in a lot of information, and it has to filter through a lot of information. And so your brain takes note of things that are good or bad. And if you're not falling into either of those, people will just forget you exist. So with that done, let's talk about how I would know. How did I learn this stuff? Well, now you know me as the body language boss. I'm a speaker, coach, nonverbal expert, but I wasn't always. In fact, growing up, my parents actually thought I was slightly autistic because I was so bad at reading people, connecting to people, making friends. I always said the wrong thing. I was offending people, making people angry. And it was really, really hard for me to make friends. So my mom started by giving me a book on people skills to try to help me figure this thing out. And once I realized, oh, you can learn how to understand people from a book, I was looking for all the books I could find. And so I studied every body language book I could find for a really long time, all throughout high school and in my first years of college. And those skills I got were actually what helped me to get a solid job and what helped me to win and woo my husband, even though the first time we met, he totally thought I was lesbian. So I put him in the romantic partner category. He did not put me in that category. So it is possible to change the category you've fallen into, but it's so much easier when you get put in the right category in the first place. But anyway, back to the beginning. So I studied every body language book I could find. And finally, after college, after years of personal study, I found a private human behavior research lab where I was formally certified in communication, body language, and charisma. So now it's my goal to help teach as many professionals as I possibly can. I also work with high school students just for fun to help them get a better start than I had in these skills. All right. So if you have any questions so far, please put them in the chat. And I'll show you again how to find the chat. You just hover over these controls, more, and the chat is right in there. No big deal. So let's get started with talking about the first impression that you're actually making. We've covered what people use, but let's talk about the one you're making and the one you want to make. So in the chat, I want you to go over to the chat and tell me right now what you want people to think of you when they first meet you. What do you want people to think of you when they first meet you? Kevin, John, how do you want people to see you? Now, when I give this presentation live, most people say they want to be seen as a leader or confident or friendly. And Kevin, you said the other big thing that people say all the time. They want to be seen as trustworthy. And there's actually one exact body language cue you use to show trustworthiness, which I think is really cool. John, you're just joining us. Do you know how you want people to see you? All right, so for those of you watching the replay, I want you to notice just to yourself what you really want people to assume about you when they first meet you. And what do you think they currently think about you? So when I was first starting out with body language, people would meet me and assume that I was standoffish, that I was arrogant, that I was unlikable because of the first impression that I was sending. But what I really wanted was to be seen as friendly, interesting, approachable. So I had to make some big changes in my body language to make that happen. So the 3 to 5 words people used to describe me would have been standoffish, unlikable, arrogant. But now people often say I'm enthusiastic. They say I'm confident, and sometimes with the hair especially, they say I'm brave. So there's that. And I also want you to notice which category you are most likely to be sorted into when you meet new people. So these are the 4 categories we're talking about, okay? Friend, predator, romantic partner, or indifferent category. And if you've noticed people checking you out, asking you out, this is the category. If people are sending you, if they're excluding you, if they are disliking you, you're falling into the predator category. If people immediately want to get to know you, if they immediately want to work with you, you're falling into this category. And if people have a hard time remembering you, you've been falling into the indifferent category. So you want to start off just by noticing where you are. Now, when my clients are in my coaching program, this is something we go through together and we figure it out step by step together. But since this is a workshop and we've only got a little bit of time together, you'll have to do it on your own. I also want you to wonder what people think about you based on your outer appearance. Are you coming across as a punk rock fan? Are you coming across as a really shy, mousy, dowdy person? As a professional? As a mechanic? Like, how are people seeing you? So in my first impression to my husband, I came across as a lesbian. That wasn't a message I was intending to send, but it was the message that was being received. And so by breaking down how your body language, your outer appearance, your voice tone, and your words, you can get a very solid idea of how people are seeing you. And when you meet new people, what do you feel? Do you feel bored, nervous, interested, curious? Knowing what you're feeling lets us know which emotions we need to tap into to help change your first impression. All right, so there is the introspective part that only you can answer. We are now going to get into the stuff that I can actually teach. So let's talk about the dial. So in my study, I found that there are 4 basic people skills that if you have, your life is awesome. If you lack, your life sucks. And the degree to which your life is awesome or sucks depends on how strongly you have those skills and if you have all of them. Now, men and women have slight statistical differences in which ones they tend to have, but I want you to just notice for yourself. I'm going to go through these and explain what each one is, and then you're going to measure yourself to figure out how strong you are. And again, this is something that I'm the only one who is teaching these skills. Other body language experts, other presence experts, they have different formulas that they use. This is the one that I think covers everything you need to succeed with people. So let's get started. I call it the dial. First, there is diplomacy. So diplomacy is what you have if you are able to navigate conflict while feeling comfortable and calm and getting what you want, but the other person is still happy to have talked with you. Most people seriously struggle with diplomacy. If you've ever had to work in collections, if you've ever had to turn someone down from a date, if you've ever had someone reject you during a sale, those are all situations where you need diplomacy. I had one client who hired me to help him fire people. And this is the skill that he needed most of all, diplomacy. So diplomacy is what you use to have hard conversations in a way that makes hard conversations easy and even fun. So I want you to score yourself on a scale of 1 to 10. 1 being you do not have this at all. You are the least diplomatic person you've ever met. And 10 being you are Obi-Wan Kenobi, the great negotiator. So you are able to easily ask for what you want and get it while making the other person happy. So let me know in the chat what your score is. When I started out, my score was about a 3. All right, Kevin, that's a really good score. This is usually the one that people struggle with the most. All right, then let's go down to insight. Now, insight is something that, if you've heard of Paul Ekman or Joe Navarro, their programs focus a lot on insight. And insight is basically reading their body language, their voice tone, and their words to figure out what they're thinking and feeling, and to make sure they're telling the truth. So I do teach a little bit of lie detection in this section. So go ahead and score yourself in insight. If you're able to read people's faces, body language, and voice tone and words. If you're able to really tell what people are thinking and feeling. I started out middling average on this. I was about 5. All right, that's a really high score, Kevin. Way to go. Then authority. This is one that women are most likely to be seen as lower in authority. That's not true of every woman, but it is kind of average across the board. So authority is when people meet you, they immediately see you as capable, competent, confident, and so they give you the respect and deference that you deserve. And this is something a lot of my women clients come to me because they're tired of being ignored, disrespected, or not taken seriously. So if when you meet people, you immediately get respect, get obedience, you've probably got a high authority score. But if you don't get treated the way you want to, your authority score is probably a little bit lower. I started out mostly as an 8. I came across as very authoritative, even though it was a very unlikable authoritarian. All right. And finally, likability. Likability is actually the foundation. This is one that I usually start with in my coaching course. So originally it was going to be L-A-I-D instead of D-I-A-L, but I couldn't find a tasteful way to use that in business. So we have the dial method. But likability is what you use right away so that people feel safe with you, so they're wanting to approach you and be your friend. So if you find that people are easily able to strike up a conversation with you, they give you their life story right away, you are probably really high in likability. I was about a 2 when I got started. This area was really hard for me. All right, that makes sense. So when you come down and you measure likability and authority, likability and authority are the skills that you use right away to send the majority of your first impression. So if you come across as someone who is really high in authority but really low in likability, you end up in this side of the scale, which means if you're high in authority, low in likability, you might be feared, envied, or excluded. On the other hand, if you're high in likability but low in authority, you're well liked, but you're not respected. And people often think you're incompetent. They don't really take you seriously. Then there are those poor souls who are neither highly competent nor very likable. So they end up in a sad little cloud over here where they are avoided, disliked, and resented. And so these people, you at least trust they'll get the job done if they're high in authority. These people, you at least trust they'll be nice to you if they're high in likability. But these people don't have any of that going for them. And so they need to improve in both areas in order to really get the results that they want. But if you use the right body language, if you know how to navigate those conflicts and how to deal with people, if you've got all 4 aspects of the dial method, you end up in this area where you're very likable and very well respected. This is where charisma happens, achievement happens. This is where you've attained charm, that career, home, and relationship mastery, where people immediately see you, respect you, and want to work with you. This is the ultimate goal of my coaching program, to get people all the way up into here so that they're getting the respect they deserve, they're getting the cooperation they need, and they're also strengthening their social, professional, and home relationships. This area is where life is good. You're making sales, you're strengthening your networks, and people like to be around you. So likability and authority make that solid first impression, and then diplomacy and insight help you go through the conflict, set and keep healthy boundaries, and strengthen your relationship. And so if you have all 4 skills in order, that is how you get the respect, results, appreciation, and recognition that you deserve. That's when you have more of everything that you want in your life. So people often ask me, does this actually work? Because when you are thinking of, oh, I want to improve my life, I want to improve my career, I want to improve my social life, or I want to really have a wonderful romantic life, people don't immediately think of body language or communication. They might think of taking a new sales program. They might think of, I don't even know what people think of instead. But the first answer is almost never, oh, I'm going to check out my body language. So I've compiled a couple of testimonials from my clients who have been in the coaching program with me so you can see if this actually does work. So one of my clients, we'll call her Jay. She always felt confident that people would underestimate her and treat her like a child. She's actually in her 30s. But after our coaching program, people take her seriously, they listen to what she's saying, and they treat her like a leader. She is now one of those people who is the first person you look to in a room. She walks with a cane, she's going through a lot of other things, but people treat her like a queen because she knows how to send that signal. She's actually a teacher. She runs her own teaching program in an actually dangerous part of the world. So for her, she says, it has been incredibly rewarding and my students are happier in class. I can walk down the street feeling safer and I feel confident walking into conflict. So she actually hired me to help her with her collections conversations. That was her big goal for our coaching program. So for her, being able to walk into conflict and still get respect and still have that strong relationship with people, that was really important for her. C, down here, he was able to increase the number of leads he got after giving a presentation. He's in a really sales-heavy career. So now he's able to read prospects to gauge how the sale is going, what he needs to tweak, and adjust the conversation as needed. I'm actually really proud of him. He was one of my very first clients. And then B. So B's situation was interesting. She had someone she relied on for business who she really thought liked her. She thought they had a really great relationship. But after a few of our sessions, she noticed disgust and contempt on their face, which let her know there was a huge underlying issue in the relationship. She tried to fix it, but it wasn't really working out. So she switched to someone else who's been sending her way more referrals. And if she hadn't learned these skills, she never would have known how they really felt about her. So these are just a few of my clients that this is some of the results that they've gotten just from working together. So I want to ask you right now, why do you want to change the way people see you? Go ahead and put it in the chat for me. All right, Kevin is saying he's more curious about how they see you currently than if he needs to change. And that brings up an interesting problem because all of these scores up here, these are self-reported. And so if I had been scoring myself back in high school, I would have thought that, hey, you know what? I'm incredibly likable. You know what? I'm incredibly insightful. Of course, I can tell exactly what people are thinking. And I would have thought, you know what? My way is the best way. So of course that means I'm diplomatic because I'm right and people should just see that. But knowing what I know now, I had no idea how wrong I really was and how low my score actually was. So if you really want to find out what people think about you, one of the very best ways is to actually think about how they describe you. So let's go back here. Kevin, what 3 to 5 words do people often use to describe you? Insightful, smart, dependable. All right. All right, so you're coming across as very intelligent, you're coming across as solid, competent, and people seem to think you can read them well. That's really good. So it sounds like people are scoring you highish in these areas, but not necessarily in likability. And that can be a problem because often what happens is the first impression, it's like a mask that people see when they first meet us. And so there's the first impression that people end up interacting with, and they never actually see what's behind the first impression. So they never see the real you. They just see this mask that they think you're wearing. And so, Kevin, you've said sometimes it can come across as standoffish, and that can be a problem because it's great that you're insightful and diplomatic, but those things only count after you've made the first impression. And so if your first impression happens and you're coming across in this area, you can be driving away people who put you into the predator category. So, all right, in this category, high likability, low authority, this is often sorted into either the friend category or the indifferent category, depending on how likable you are. Because the friend category is often used for people who are not just friendly, but also useful. So I'm sure you've had a situation where you meet someone who is really happy to talk with you, would talk your ear off, and is really easy to get along with, but you don't actually want to work with them. You don't want to get to know them. And so you probably wouldn't end up putting them in the friend category. You put them in the indifferent category. That would be someone to kind of avoid. Because as friendly as they are, they're wasting your time. So you would end up putting them, even though they're here and they're really well likable, you would end up putting them in the indifferent category. So over here where you are, where it's high authority but not really high likability, especially in that first impression, you could be being sorted into the predator category, where people are actually intimidated by you, scared of you when they first meet. And so you're over there, you're just minding your own business, no big deal. And it turns out you're actually quite likable, quite friendly. But in that very first impression, you don't seem very friendly, which means people will sort you into this category and be like, oh, that Kevin, yeah, he's good at what he does, but he's kind of scary. And so people can sort you into this category sometimes just because of your facial expression. You might be having what's called RBF, or resting bitch face, which is where you look, maybe you have an intense eyebrow expression, or you're concentrating really hard, or your face just naturally has a slight frown when you relax it. Any of those could cause you to come across as unapproachable, angry, intimidating. So that could be just one thing that's getting you sorted into the predator category. Also, sometimes people will just be looking for approachable body language. And even if you're not sending off scary signals, the fact that you're not sending off friendly signals is enough to make them nervous of you, a little intimidated by you. So just that by itself, the lack of friendly, likable, nonverbal cues might be enough to get you sorted into this predator category. So Kevin, does that make sense so far? All right, thank you. That's very kind. Do you have any other questions? Introvert, extrovert. All right, that is very interesting. So when clients first sign on for my coaching program, in our very first session, I have them take this in-depth assessment that I pay for, where they figure out exactly how they score in 5 different personality aspects. And so you've probably taken like the Myers-Briggs personality test. There are a bunch of different personality tests out there, and most of them are out of date, irrelevant, and non-scientific. They don't actually measure real things, and they're not very useful in real life. For example, Myers-Briggs has 0 correlation with usefulness in the workplace. If you use the Myers-Briggs to hire certain types of managers, it doesn't work. It doesn't work at all. So I use the only personality spectrum that has actual rock solid science behind it, and that is the Big 5 personality spectrum. And so there are 5 different aspects of your personality that, one, people are able to measure several of them and guess several of them when they first meet you. But even more importantly, everything you like about yourself or dislike about others can be measured on this personality spectrum. And so introversion, extroversion falls into this personality spectrum. And extroversion has 2 different aspects. One is enthusiasm. So I am very, very enthusiastic. Enthusiastic people, they are a little impulsive, spontaneous. It is really easy for them to be cheerful, excited, in a good mood. And if you are low in enthusiasm, or if you are low in extroversion, that is strongly correlated with a lack of positive emotion. So if you are highly extroverted, it's very likely that you experience a lot of positive emotion in your life. Now, negative emotion, on the other hand, is correlated really strongly with neuroticism. And I'm going to just type this out in the chat real quick so you can see it. So it is the Big 5, aka ocean, for openness, conscientiousness, it's hard to spell, extroversion, agreeableness, and neuroticism. There we go. I can spell. All right. So extroversion is strongly correlated to positive emotion. Neuroticism is strongly correlated to negative emotion. So introvert versus extrovert. An introvert is more likely to be bold and outgoing when they first meet someone, which, depending on how good their nonverbal cues are, could get them into the friend category, or it could freak people out and get them into the predator category. So it really does all come down to those nonverbal communication skills you have. And it's also important to note that introverts can act extroverted and extroverts can act introverted. We all have those different groups and situations where we really thrive, and we all have those groups and situations where we are just miserable. I'm actually incredibly extroverted. I am in the 95th percentile for extroversion. I am more extroverted than over 95% of people. But there are still a lot of situations where I don't enjoy interacting with people. And that's something I have to consciously work on, how I am coming across to people, because due to my other personality aspects, I can be very, very, very picky about who I like, who I work with, and where I want to spend my time. So even though I'm very, very extroverted, it doesn't mean that I am immediately put into the friend category. I was usually put into the predator category instead. So introverted or extroverted, if you have the right nonverbal cues, where you fall into this area, it doesn't matter whether you're an introvert or an extrovert. You can still make that rock solid first impression so that people like you right away. And I found what's really helpful for introverts especially is when they learn diplomacy and insight. Because introverts, they need to be able, okay, so extroversion is made up of two categories, right? Enthusiasm, which we talked about, and the other one is assertiveness. And so if you are assertive, you can confidently ask for what you want, push for what you want, and you'll almost always get it. So for introverts, where they are naturally not as assertive, that means they often have a harder time asking for what they want, which means often they are not getting what they want. In fact, they are getting what they don't want, which can be very, very frustrating, and it can make them resentful, irritated. This is one area where introverts and extroverts really clash, because the assertive extrovert is like rolling over, steamrolling the introvert, which can be very, very stressful for their relationships. So one of the things I teach introverts is diplomacy and authority, so they can increase their assertiveness without feeling like they're steamrolling people. So they can confidently say no and still get what they want. And what I often have to teach extroverts is insight, so they can tell when they're pushing too hard and they need to back off. So each client that I have has a different blend of this that they need to learn. And there are often extroverts who do need diplomacy and authority. That's totally cool. But I found extroverts tend to need a little more of that authority, and extroverts need more of that insight, and introverts often need more of the authority. Does that answer your question about introvert versus extrovert? Awesome. Any other questions? I love your questions so far. This is so fun to talk about. All right. Oh, I'm glad you enjoy it. This topic, I only recently added personality into my coaching program, but I found it's been really helpful for people to consciously discover how they fall on these different aspects, because that really influences what they need to learn in the dial method. And sometimes people just have a really hard time liking themselves. And so knowing how you fall on those spectrums is really crucial for accepting who you are and how you want to show up in the world. So that is one of my favorite things to teach. But I want to ask on the chat, which one of these 4 areas would be most useful for you to grow right now? Which one of these 4 areas, diplomacy, insight, authority, or likability, would be most useful for you to grow right now? All right. Kevin, I love that you are on the chat. This is so much fun. So likability and diplomacy. All right, we will talk about both of those. Thank you, Angie, for chiming that in. Let's start with likability. So likability is actually really easy once you know the nonverbals. Likability is almost entirely nonverbal. So it comes down to even just adding 2 or 3 small nonverbal signals can really change your likability score. For example, all right, when I was in high school, I came across as very unlikable, even though I didn't know it. And one of the reasons was because when I met people, I would always stand like this. And I'll even get closer so you can see what I was doing with my face. With my face, I was either doing this or this. So a bit of a scowl on my face. Now, I didn't realize I was doing it. It was just my normal face. But even though I wasn't consciously sending off that signal, it was still being received as unlikable, predatory, unapproachable, do not approach. So once I learned that there are certain nonverbal signals you can actually use to make people think, oh, this person is safe and likable and approachable, great. That made a huge difference for me. And there's actually a whole long list of them. Likability is really the foundation of my coaching program, and everything else builds on top of that. But likability, if you don't have likability, it doesn't matter how good you are in the other aspects, because you're still not going to get the results that you want. Because if you're not likable, people can't put you into the friend category. They can't. And so, for example, in your situation, Kevin, where you are diplomatic, you are insightful, and you are highly competent, you've got almost everything you need, but that likability section is going to be the thing that really kicks things into gear for you. So likability, one thing you can do differently in order to increase your likability is to check your face. I want you to notice what your resting face does. What does your face do when you're not using it? And one easy way to check this is just to take your phone, relax your face, and take a photo. So this, let me put my glasses back on so I can see. This is my resting face, all right? You can tell it doesn't look very friendly. There's no natural smile, there's no like smiley eyes, anything like that. Our natural faces are almost always a little bit grumpy. But if you notice what your natural face is and then build awareness of when you're using your natural face, you can consciously choose when to have a friendlier expression. So Kevin, for example, have you ever attended a BNI meeting or any sort of other networking event? All the time, yeah, I bet you're a professional. So I had one BNI meeting where the president, when she was up talking to people, she was like super friendly, super smiley, like over the top friendly. And then as soon as she sat down, her face looked like this. And so I had the unfortunate experience of walking in when her face was like this. And I was like, oh, she hates me. Who is this person? Why is she in such a bad mood? It was just her resting bitch face. So I take care when I am in public, when I'm waiting for a client or at a networking event or waiting to go on stage to speak, I consciously control my facial expression. So my resting face looks like this, sometimes even worse. So I will consciously soften my eyebrows. I will consciously turn up the corners of my cheeks, of my mouth. And so the difference between this and this, even though it's really a small difference, it is enough to nudge me out of the predator category and closer into the friend category. So that is just one itty bitty thing that you can start using right now. So you are more comfortable on stage than in one-on-one conversations. Me too. And for me, that's because on stage, I'm controlling the room. I am acting on stage. I know exactly what I'm talking about. I know exactly who I'm talking to. I am in control. But in one-on-one interactions, it matters what the other person thinks. You have to read them. You have to react to them. And so you're so much more casual in those one-on-one interactions, which makes it harder to know exactly how to act. And so even just that slight difference of your face, say you're sitting at a table waiting for people to come in for a BNI meeting, even taking your face from this to this can help people to approach you. Now, if you want, we can sign up. There's something I'm offering at the very end where I think if we were to talk, I could give you a couple more of those cues that you can use just to make those one-on-one conversations way more comfortable and way more relaxed for you. Is that something that would make sense for you? All right, we'll see when we get to the end. But Angie, if you are listening, let's talk a little bit about diplomacy. So diplomacy, this is the keystone, this is the cap of this coaching program. So it used to be I only taught these three things: insight, authority, and likability. And people were seeing interesting results, but they weren't seeing all the results that I knew they could. And that was when I dove into the verbal aspect, the negotiation aspect. And that's where it really became all about boundaries, negotiation, conflict. And so in diplomacy, the keystone of diplomacy is knowing how to get other people to feel like they are understood and accepted. And that sounds like the exact opposite of what you want. Often when people are in a conflict, instead of listening to the other person, they want to feel listened to. But in diplomacy, he who listens first wins. And so diplomacy is all about figuring out what's going on in the other person's head, which insight helps a lot with. Figuring out what emotions they're feeling, what they want, what their motivations are, which you get with insight. And then diplomacy comes in on how to act, what to do about it, what to say to get them to calm down, what to say to let them know you understand, what to say to get your point across in a way where they actually listen and are happy that they've listened to you. So diplomacy, I feel like it is the Jedi mind trick where it's not manipulative and you're not trying to hurt people. Diplomacy is when you are able to stand up for yourself in a way that honors the other person. So Angie, I want you to chime in and let me know if that makes sense for you so far. It does. All right. Angie, is there anything else about diplomacy that you would like to know or like me to go into? Not getting irritated. Oh man, that is the hardest part of diplomacy, but that is one of the first things we teach when we get to the diplomacy section. Because one interesting thing that happens when we're in the insight section, we learn how to read facial expressions, micro expressions. And what most people don't know is that when you see a facial expression on someone else's face, the muscles in your face will mirror it for a fraction of a second. Usually you don't even notice. But your face will mirror their face. And when you take that piece and you add in the fact that there's this loop, there's a loop between your face and your emotions. And most people think it's the emotions that cause the face, but it's actually a full circle because your face influences your emotions. So you feel an emotion, you make an expression. And when you make an expression, you begin to feel that emotion. So when you put these two pieces together, someone is making an angry face at you because they're in the middle of a conflict. Your face mimics their angry face, and now you feel more angry. So that is one problem that happens in these difficult conversations because it is so easy to get irritated and upset, which is why in the diplomacy section, I actually have a conflict roadmap that I walk through with my clients that they can print out and use on their own. And in the conflict roadmap, it gives you the exact steps and the exact tools that we've talked about that you need to take in order to stay calm yourself and to know what to do next. And for most of my clients, what I've heard consistently is that having the roadmap to conflict makes it easy. Because in a normal fight, you don't know what to do to make it stop. You don't know what to do to repair the relationship. You are reacting totally in the moment, totally on your emotions, which makes it very hard to get anything done productively. But when you have a roadmap, when you know the exact next step to take, when you know the exact strategy to take, that is when it is easy to stay calm, because you know what you need to do. And so instead of your emotions leading you, you are the one in charge of your emotions. Does that make sense? Does that make sense, Angie? Does that sound useful? All right. All right. Well, with that said, are there any other questions that I can cover right now? We've got about 13 minutes left, and so that gives us time for one or two more questions. All right. And I will close by asking, when you change the way people see you. So Angie, when you increase your diplomacy, Kevin, when you increase your likability, what will change in your professional life or in your personal life? And you don't have to share with me in the chat, but I would really appreciate it if you would. All right, one of you is saying, if you can fix that, you won't want to strangle people regularly. And I know exactly how that feels. Yes. And one of you is saying you would have a far better first impression. And that makes a lot of sense. And one thing I found is that one can feed into the other. So if you're making a far better first impression, that gives you a lot less work to do on the insight and diplomacy section. All right, so for one of my clients, she was not coming across really well in the authority section, which meant a lot of people were trying to steamroll over her. And that meant she had to be really solid on the diplomacy section until we figured out the authority section. And once she came across as higher in authority, people stopped trying to push her boundaries because they could tell just from that first impression she wasn't someone to mess with. And then I had another client who really struggled with likability. Like, this was her kryptonite. And so for her, she was able to read people really well, and she was able to tell that something was wrong, but she didn't know what it was until we targeted her likability. And all of a sudden, instead of people excluding her, instead of people having a problem with her, getting offended by her, and her having to, she was being bombarded with all these negative body language signals from people around her, which was really stressful for her. But once we figured out the likability, it was like the conflict was over, the battle ceased, and people were able to, instead of assuming the worst about her, because she was sending those likability signals, people were really starting to like her. They were able to take what she said in the best way possible instead of twisting it to assume, because, all right, when people put you into one of these categories, They will cherry pick the information from your next interactions in order to match which category they put you in. So in essence, if you make a really good first impression and then you mess up later, people will give you the benefit of the doubt and they will help you live up to that first impression. But if you make a really crappy first impression and it turns out you're really awesome later, people will help you live down to that first impression. And so instead of thinking, wow, I guess I misjudged him, most people will think, oh, he must be having a good day today. Or, oh, I guess he's really putting on the charm for this person, instead of thinking, wow, I really misjudged him. He actually is a great guy. So that's why it is crucial to get your first impression set up so where it is actually matching what you are sending out. Because like I said, when people meet you, they don't actually see you. They just see their assumptions about you. It's like a mask that they force you to wear. And so you want to make sure the mask is made up of things that you actually want people to assume about you. So it's a mask you're happy to wear and happy to let people peel back piece by piece in their own time, instead of a mask that is strangling you, holding you back, and driving people away. With that said, I'm going to ask you in the chat again, what has been the most valuable thing or the most interesting thing that you've learned today? I know we covered a lot. We covered a lot of different content. Some of it even wasn't supposed to be in this presentation, but I am very curious about what was most interesting and most helpful for you. RBF, yeah. RBF is a killer, the silent killer that makes you think people don't like you, and that makes people think you don't like them. So RBF, if there's one thing you take away from this, get rid of that RBF. You don't have to always have a happy facial expression. That would be kind of weird. But when you're in a situation where you are meeting new people and you want them to think well of you, that is the time to soften your face and tweak up those mouth corners so that people do think the best of you. All right. So most of the time, when people find me through my website, through my email, and they want to sign up they want to see if we're a good fit together, the next step is a phone call. And just to make sure people are serious, I make them pay a whole $5, because if they put down even $1, they are way more solid about showing up and actually wanting to work with me, instead of it being like spur of the moment sort of thing. But for those of you who are here, if it makes sense for you, for us to talk about working together, if this feels like, maybe this will be a good fit, if it makes sense for you, you can click down here and it will open up a new page, and I will put that link here in the chat. And if you're watching the replay, this will be emailed to you as well. You just click the button and it will sign up for a short little phone call, which is free. I'm not going to make you pay for it. Just as a thank you, because you've already paid for the workshop, you're here. So if it makes sense for you, if you have questions about which of my programs would be best for you, if you are just wondering what it would look like to work together, this is a great opportunity for us to just check it out, have a little conversation about it. All right, everyone, thank you for coming to the workshop and for watching the replay, and I will let you go. Have a good day. See you.